Cognition and Nition with C-Class. Today's episode, I'll be talking with Jeff Caudle. I connected with Jeff Caudle on Quora, and the reason was that he created a website called Brain Buddies.io, which were for individuals of the INTP personality type, which most of you know is my personality type. So we kind of just linked. Then I reached out to Jeff, and I learned that we share a mutual interest in our interest for automation in business and creating sustainable businesses and teaching people how to optimize their businesses for both of these. So I'm welcoming Jeff to the show today to tell you a little bit about what he's up to. So how's it going, Jeff?
It's going good.
So the first thing I'm really wondering is, I've seen you talk about like you started with your grandfather in construction, right? So where are you right now, and how did construction get you there? Because it seems like that played a big role on you to start thinking about how businesses operate, right?
Right. So, so when I was 12, I was mentored by my grandfather as far as like, construction, handyman work, and everything else. But the thing that he taught me was basically that, essentially, basically what the role of a manager or owner was, the difference between an owner versus a worker. If you look at like a worker, for example, like what he would say is that a worker is always somebody who specializes in one thing, but a manager is somebody, or an owner is somebody who sees everything. They see all the jobs. They know how to do everything, basically. But they don't do everything. They just know how everything works end to end. And what he taught me the most was that the role of a business owner is to predict the needs of other people, both their employees and their customers. And so that always stuck with me, because I don't think a lot of people actually think like that. I think they kind of think about their own little world. But that's where I got into kind of process automation and systems design. I think is that I was always kind of thinking about how can I improve this? How can I think 3 or 4 steps ahead? And how can I make it so that the end point looks good, like the end product? Because you can struggle across the way, but you want to make sure that everything is systematized. Because when you have 4 or 5 people in a process line, if there's a stall at one point, then essentially everybody stalls after them. And so one stall of 15 minutes for one worker creates a stall for everyone else that's after them. And it makes it really, and then also the other people behind them also stall. So it's really important to run things efficiently. And I guess that's also a big thing, is that he taught me how to both run and manage things efficiently, but also to, I think, live efficiently, to manage your time efficiently, if that makes sense.
No, without a doubt. So when you talk about efficiency, where does that really start in a business, though? I get that the owner has a lot to do. Like, the owner knows everything, and from the owner's knowledge, they can create systems that are going to be efficient. But where is it really starting? Is it where can the owner start putting his focus towards in the business that's going to allow him to be even more effective?
Right. So a lot of times we use words like effective or better or good, but the question is that how do you define that, right? And who defines that? So if I ask you, for example, what is better or what is effective, right? If I ask you that question, let's just say you're running a business, let's say construction, right? What is better or what is effective in a construction business? Well, that really depends on the teams, and it depends on what the customer wants, right? But it could also be different depending on if you're in healthcare, for example. Effective is not always efficient in healthcare. You can't just churn out better, recovery. Most people actually don't get better. It's not like sales where you have like a 2% success rate. It's almost zero. It's almost like a myth of people getting better, because I worked in the healthcare industry as well. So you have to keep in mind the industry that you're in. You have to keep in mind the climate that you're in. Just like any kind of, I guess you have to kind of think about it from a ecology perspective than a business perspective. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
like climate, basically.
Yeah, basically, what are, so I guess I think a way we could actually look at this is like, are there universal areas where most businesses break down, and that's where you're looking kind of to find these problems? It's like, can you explain, is that what you would say this is, that you're explaining?
Right.
Uh,
So the way I think about it is that every business is an analogy or a metaphor for another business. And we do this all the time. Like we'll explain, life circumstances with cars or airplanes or, parachuting or whatever. But we use analogies of different things. But so there are cross compatibilities just in terms in general in the language that we use. And that does translate into business. But the important part, I think, is to make sure that you understand what makes your business different, because I think a lot of people, I've seen this, they have a product and it looks like everyone else's, but their product actually might still be good. It might actually be better than other people's, even though it's exactly identical to someone else's. Well, why would that be, right? Again, the question comes back to, what does the customer want, right? Is it something, how close are they to the customer? Adjacency. The way I think about it is the bandwidth problem, I guess. A lot of times we ask the wrong questions. We think about things in terms of making it better or best, but a lot of research has shown that the faster you can implement a service and the faster you can execute it and complete it and finish it, the more trust your customer has in you. Now, that's not always true 100%. If you're a mechanic, sometimes you have to create delays so they think that you spent more time on it. But overall, the general interaction itself has to be very smooth. There has to be very, very high bandwidth between you and the customer. And that's what can make you more like superior to the customer or to the other businesses, I mean. Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
This is why in business they say location, location, location. It's a bandwidth problem, is what I'm saying. Not a product problem, not a business problem, a bandwidth problem.
You're saying getting the flow of the business in a way.
Well,
is that what we're looking at?
Okay, so
because real quick, I've heard you talk about like how businesses, most of our businesses, they're really independent contractors, right? Or they're small businesses, owner operated pretty much, and a lot of the fixes, because those are the businesses that really struggle. And I think it sounded like a lot of the fixes are coming from them being able to network with other businesses in a way, right? Mm-hmm. And they're because of how their business is set up, it sounded like maybe they're trying to take on too much instead of using a network and using technology to network. Is that what you are explaining with the bandwidth in a way? Like not being able to progress through. Right?
What I'm saying is that a lot of times people define. I've seen a lot of businesses make this mistake, and I've made this mistake before, which is that you assume that the business is defined by their product. They're not. Many businesses don't even have products. Facebook doesn't have a product. I mean, their product is basically what people using the platform, but that's not actually a product, right? What is it that Facebook provides? They basically speed up the bandwidth problem. They solve the bandwidth problem for the user, so that solves the marketing problem. You see what I'm saying? Like, they are speeding up the transaction time between the user and other users, or the content and the user, or the market. Basically, does that make sense? Like,
so
why is Tinder successful?
It does. What I'm trying to kind of narrow it down. Is it coming down to marketing, and that in the end, like, that's what the business your business is your marketing, obviously, but but like, what should business be focusing on to do something like what Facebook does? Because Facebook didn't start as what it is. I don't think anyone ever thought that Facebook would have all these businesses and things at first. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's a good question. So if you look back at its history, what did it do? It basically piggybacked off of the Harvard yearbook, essentially, which is why it was called the Facebook. It was meant to be a substitution, but what it was really meant to do was to allow for Harvard students and stuff like that to basically set up parties and to also, network with other, fraternities and stuff like that, basically. So that's what they did. They piggybacked off of the Harvard education system, and originally they were only for colleges. So you have to think about that. So if you look at every successful system, it almost, or business today, it almost always piggybacked off of some other thing. So what did Amazon piggyback off? They piggybacked off of the United States Postal Service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like if you look at another one, like Netflix, for example, what did they do? They basically rode the wave and the change of internet video streaming, basically. So they piggyback off of the hardware, or sorry, the software infrastructure that was already there. There was already like a Silverlight video streaming like widget or plugin that basically allowed them to do video streaming, which is what basically allowed them to really take off. But before that, they were also using the mail system. But I guess like what I'm saying is that it's not like you can have a very like if you look at McDonald's or Wendy's or just like a general like restaurant or a general place, they don't provide a better service. They don't provide a better burger. They don't even charge less. They're the same cost. They're basically identical. Why does one do better than the other? Is it really advertising? It's not advertising. It's the fact, it's their location. How close are they to you? Because people generally, if they see you all the time, if this is closer to where I live, it's literally how close are you to where the customer lives? Because the closer that McDonald's is or Wendy's is to where you live, the more likely you are to go there. So then we have to think about that in terms of in the online space, because people also have a sort of a home online now. They spend more time online, you know, now than ever before, just because of remote working. So now you have to think about, well, now there's an online kind of presence that each person has. And so they might have like they have a landing page, for example, and maybe that's kind of their starting point. And then the question is, okay, so what is the fastest thing there if I'm looking for a service? And that's where the Google ranking system comes into play. That's why the top ranked websites or top ranked businesses, you know, basically are picked. It's not because they offer something better. It's just because they're the closest to the homepage. People think in terms of adjacency. They think, they don't think, do I like this person? They think, how close is this person to the people I know? And how close is this person to me? If you read the book, there's a book called Influence. They use these protocols for basically developing informants, and one of them is repetition and location. They'll rent out the apartment next door to the person they want to basically turn into an informant. They'll continuously engage them, but they don't lie about their intentions. But they're trying to basically convert a spy, you know, a Russian spy, and basically turn them into an asset. And the way they do that is they continuously make themselves just near them location-wise, and subconsciously and psychologically, people actually start to trust you, and they will actually go to you even if you can't help them. That's the weird part about it. So, but the first problem that businesses have is that they don't know how to actually make themselves adjacent to their customer. They don't understand their customers. They don't listen to their customers. They don't like their customers, and that's why a lot of businesses don't actually succeed. It's not because they don't offer a better product. Many businesses will offer a better product. There's many other YouTubes out there. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's many people making it, but they're not going to succeed. Why? Why doesn't a better YouTube come along? Why doesn't a better Twitter come along? There's a reason for it. And so this is one of the things that I discovered, is that it's not all about the product and it's not all about the business. Does that make sense?
So yeah, it definitely does. I'm trying to narrow in on, is it the technology? Is it building a network with people who do these certain skills? Or should you try to, I always think about, I'm sure you've thought about it, like Elon Musk and his first principles thinking, you know, like everything you kind of build on top of your foundation. When I think about that, it's like my Maslow's hierarchy. You have your physical needs and you're building up onto it until your business is what it is. You know what I mean? What should business owners be doing? Like, because a lot of them are already deep into their business. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Where do they make the fix there? Or if somebody's thinking about getting started, where do they bring in these principles of building that foundation to get to these things where, you know, maybe not as big as Facebook, but you have that following that you need to sustain your business, which is kind of that I heard you talk about, like the 100-year business, and I get that sustaining the business. Any business once it's run its cycle through certain things can be sustained a lot easier. So I would like to hear some of those specifics for people who are in their business trying to figure out where they should go to get to these, or people who want to start and make sure they start from the right spot.
So let me ask you, if Elon Musk started with the Cybertruck off the bat, when they were in their early 2009, 2010 days, just getting the first kind of models off the lot, right? If he started with the Cybertruck, do you think he would have succeeded?
Nope.
Exactly. Right. Why?
Because no one would have trusted him. That's how I see it. Like it wasn't like his truck would be trusted now because of the cars he's built, the technology he's built, and that truck is still built on his original founding technology. So that's why I really idolize how he does it. He built his foundation, and I think that's why most people trust him, as they saw he built the foundation and maintained that foundation even through those struggles. Like.
But I guess like what I'm getting at is so Cybertruck, like let's just say that the technology overall is very similar, but let's just talk about the design for a second, and the way it looks and the way it kind of is. It's a little bit kind of ostentatious, or it's a little bit kind of like flamboyant. It stands out, right? But and when you look at it, there's nothing else out there like it, right? And so there's some people that really hate it, and there's some people that like it, and there's some people that don't really know. But the thing that you have to think about is it's probably a better vehicle overall because it has solar panels. It probably has more power. It's probably just a better vehicle. Like it's probably a better system. So it's not the better system aspect that matters. We're talking about, so you're talking about foundations. You shouldn't build the foundation. Elon Musk didn't build the foundation. He didn't found the companies that he made, right? He made these companies, but they were already established at the very beginning. Does that make sense? Like he picked them up, he took the foundation they already had and he ran with it. And then he didn't introduce anything super crazy at the beginning. What he did is he basically said, it's like a sports car, or you were going to buy a Lamborghini, but why not buy this instead? You see what I'm saying? You're not trying to create anything new. You're building on top of what is already there. Does that, there are people who have built the foundations for you, and you just have to realize that it's not your job to build the foundations. You don't need to build a new Facebook to actually create a better Facebook. Like you can use the Facebook platform, for example, to create groups, and then you can migrate those groups to a new platform.
Mm-hmm. That I understand. But I'm gonna have to play devil's advocate, because do you think, what I worry about is that small businesses, if they don't find practical solutions, like to start building these these things, and this is just generally, like companies like Google and Facebook will run everything. Do you know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
I think that's the most important part about like optimizing as a small business and learning these things. So I think it's like we really have to. I would like to like kind of figure out how like they can do it from where they are right now. You know what I mean? Because they like most people are still gonna they're gonna have that foundation, and I get it. Like we should optimize those foundations, right? Like anything that's already there, we should basically optimize. And there's already systems in place. Maybe honestly, I think because you created a system, didn't you?
I created Neurodash, which was basically, it was meant to allow any storefront to convert into a mobile workforce. So if you're a restaurant, you could deliver food to your customer. If you're a construction or whatever, lawn care, basically it allowed any business to basically become a remote working environment. And that was before the pandemic. I finished it because what I saw was that what you saw, which is that everything is sort of turning towards towards remote work, but that's the reason why these tech giants are taking over, is because everything is going towards automation basically. and they're able to do process automation better. They're able to transfer information faster, which allows them to have an upper advantage. But I tried to work with business owners to get them to adopt it, but I couldn't actually get them to adopt it. And it wasn't that I didn't try. I tried very hard, but what I found was that there's a fundamental gap in the way business owners think about their business versus the reality of it. And so the problem that I ran into is that you can't change people. You can change your product, but you can't change people. And so the people that you want to help, even if they need you, you can't actually always help them. And this is the difficult part about the solution versus the product, I guess we could say. And I created a solution, but I didn't create a product. And a product is something that people will adopt. And it was really good as far as its onboarding. It was actually extremely less complicated than a lot of other systems. The interface was all automated. Everything was automated pretty much. But it was jarring for them, the idea of basically abandoning the way they were doing things in favor of something entirely new. It's almost like the idea of basically removing your basically it's for them it was like a reality shift, and that's what I'm saying. That's why Elon Musk didn't start with the Cybertruck, is because people weren't ready for it at the time. There's a problem that you can run into where you can actually be either too early or your audience doesn't exist yet, if that makes sense. So I went from that to a different perspective of, okay, what if my audience doesn't exist yet? Because I think that this was something that was needed. And again, this is still before the pandemic. So I changed my thinking about it, and I started to think more about how do you create the audiences that are actually willing to adopt new things. They're actually willing to change. They call them early adopters or first adopters in any new technology. And so what I've been working on is the idea of not marketing, but building places where new markets can form. And that's the problem, is that the problem is our markets. We don't have a cohesive market in place. We have this homogenous market, but people are not homogenous. They don't all act the same. They don't all want the same thing, right? Imagine only having one pair of sneakers or whatever for everyone. It doesn't make any sense. Or one shoe size for everyone. It doesn't make any sense, right? But we don't have anybody actually laying out the different demographics and actually basically profiling people, like not in an intrusive way, but in a way where they feel like they're being understood. And so when we talk about the problems of a business, it's a lot deeper than what I had thought before. I was thinking about it as being the problems of the business, but it's the problems of the market, if that makes sense. The market that they're in is already not functioning correctly. That's why these companies that's why a company can succeed even though they don't produce anything. It's because the market isn't functioning correctly. That's why some companies can charge crazy rates just to give you a class or a course. It doesn't make any sense. But it's a fundamental problem in the markets, not in business. And that's I can't stress this enough, because I've had a lot of different conversations, but this is something that I've learned, is that we're trying to fix and we're trying to solve and change the wrong things. And if you go in trying to do that, your results you won't be heard, because everybody's trying to do that essentially, and they're not succeeding. There's a lot of people that want to make another Google, another search engine. Why haven't they succeeded? Because the market is flawed, not the business, not the product. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why when I was talking about like Tesla, what I talked about is like when it came to building their chips, they built everything in-house. When it came to their boards and everything, they didn't want to take it from subcontractors. And you always hear people talk about building your network, but at the same time, would small businesses be better off like trying to optimize by bringing everything in closer? Like you said, it's location, but like doing everything in-house almost, but in creating that system in a way. Is that kind of where, because I mean, that's what Facebook and that's what Google do. Like anything that's out there, they take that framework and bring it into their company. And that's what I think these small businesses should be looking at. And I get the timing is bad. and it's the market. And I think it's also, you said, we've talked healthcare, you know, it's getting through those regulations and stuff. So like the thing is, when you start getting into anything like this, you actually have to, personally, I don't like talking politics, but you actually have to get into that conversation of politics and things, because those kind of affect what business can and can't do, right? Is that is that also something that you see holding your type of company back?
So like going back a second, so the smartest thing that Tesla did, in my own opinion, is that they gave away all of their work. Why did they do that? Why did they make themselves so open? Like they were willing, they gave away their software, they gave away almost everything, essentially, the technology. When he went into China, they gave away everything. You could argue he did that as a stipulation, but he had no problem with that because he was basically already doing that in the US. Why was he willing to do all that? Why was it? Is it charity? It's not charity. Why did they do that in 2014? Because they were trying to create a market. The thing is that people are creating products, but they're not creating markets. And what I'm saying is that we have to be thinking about this not as I'm creating an in-house infrastructure. Well, that doesn't matter, because that's not the first problem that you have to solve. It's a second problem, and it does matter in that sense, but that's not your biggest problem. Your biggest problem is let's say I've made a battery that essentially is a fusion battery that you don't have to change ever, basically, that it just runs forever, maybe for like 100 years. Then you try to get investment and they say no, because that actually is what will happen. And the reason why that will happen is because of obsolescence, the lack of lifetime customer value, the lack of, it's just like with the light bulb problem. The incandescent light bulb, there were other light bulbs that existed. It was that they needed to make a light bulb that would break in a consistent way. And that's one of the things that we don't think about. And so what they did is they created a market as soon as they built a light bulb that could break on a predictable schedule. And so this is the problem, is that we're thinking about, and I made this mistake too, we're thinking about the process, we're thinking about the people, we're thinking about, you know, bringing things in-house and how we're going to subcontract. None of that matters. Like, that doesn't matter. What matters is your market. You are trying to carve out a market share. And if you can do that, you will succeed. And if you can't, you will fail. And there's no other ways around that. And your business exists as long as your market exists, and your business grows as long as your market grows. But you can create a market. You don't necessarily have to fight and take other people's markets. And this is the revolutionary aspect, is that you can create a market.
So how do you figure out? All right, there's a lot of small business owners. So it's just, I get business is competitive, but is it, let's just speculate on the future a little bit. Is it going to be that there's going to be like the top dogs, and then there's not going to be a lot of small businesses? Is that kind of what could happen? I mean, because like, or are there that many openings for businesses is what I'm wondering.
So there's a couple things that could happen. If things stay the way they are and don't change, what I think will happen is that they'll get smaller. So a lot of these larger companies will actually break down into smaller entities, whether that means subcontracting or just in general, because like me and my fiance, like the platform we built was a full enterprise system that could compete on any level of the largest companies that have thousands of employees. Okay, so we can build that here, right? And that's true for a lot of other people. They can, as automation exists, the number of workers you need changes. So like if you look at innovations throughout time, there's every automation improvement increases both the output, the GDP output of that industry by tenfold, and it makes people basically 10 times more efficient. So that, and you essentially need far fewer workers, and you need and your business can essentially grow, and its revenue grows by tenfold. You see that in crops, basically. When they introduced automation in farming, you saw a tenfold increase in yields and production. You can look at agriculture. Like I did all this research a while ago, but if you look at every automation improvement, it basically on average will make the one person be able to do the job of at least 10 people. And so we think about automation as replacing people, but that's not actually going to be the case. What will happen if the average person has the access to it, which I believe they will, then the average person will be able to turn their home into a manufacturing facility. Basically, you're going to have a lot of factories, like homes that are factories.
I think COVID kind of jump-started that a little bit. Once people got to work from home, they appreciated it. So now people are going to begin finding ways to actually do it.
Right.
And I guess it even makes sense, like even Etsy, the people who do that, they have little manufacturing shops. I don't know if you know what Etsy is, but they create people kind of get to sell things pretty cheap and stuff. I think.
No, I've used
you're
Etsy.
going to see a lot of that kind of stuff, right? All right, so that's actually not as bad, right?
Yeah, but then there's also the worst case scenario, which I think is what you're wondering about. And the worst case scenario is actually the opposite, where technology will be restricted, and what you're going to see is a rollback. And this is actually where a lot of the policies are focused on, is that they're going to try to move agriculture back to essentially like oxes and plows, and they're going to basically make technology something you have to get a license for. That's where I see the other pendulum swinging, and I'm not sure which side will win out. Because these are two sides. There's the group that wants to basically grow and actually embrace automation, and there's the group that's afraid of it. And if we become afraid of automation, if we buy into the idea that automation is going to replace us, and if we buy into the idea that automation is the result of carbon emissions and greenhouse gases and stuff like that, we're going to downsize society to a point where people won't be able to manufacture anything from their homes, because they'll be dependent upon these larger entities for technology. And so you're going to see a splitting in society and divergence across different class structures. And that is sometimes what happens. And I think that's my biggest fear, is not the monopoly of Google or Facebook, because monopolies can be destroyed. I've seen them destroyed many times. I mean, just in our lifetime. And so I don't, that yes, they have influence, yes, they have power, but as long as technology is continuing, society, there's always hope, because technology is what has actually freed the working class. It didn't benefit, it benefited the rich, but it benefited the working class far more than it benefited the rich, because we were slaves before this. The average person was a slave. Your average profession was being a slave. The average population was enslaved. This was always the problem. The Romans, their entire industry was slavery, all the way through the Middle Ages, up until you had machinery. Then suddenly you didn't need slaves, and then suddenly the working class was freed. They could actually get a wage, and so it's really, really important that people understand that technology is not their enemy. But I see a lot of it where people are being told that they're going to be automated away. Their jobs are not going to be automated away. Why? Because there's a couple of problems, which is that a lot of times automation is not useful for large organizations. If you look at Amazon, I actually worked in Amazon just for a few days, just to basically scope out their automation systems, because I wanted to see the robots basically. Mm-hmm. So I applied. I went through the hiring process and stuff like that, just to see what they had. I went to the factory floor. Nothing. They don't have robots. I asked them about the robots. They said they had them, but they phased them out because they didn't work, because they required so much. They weren't actually feasible or scalable. People are actually far more scalable, and they're actually cheaper than robots. And a lot of times, and this is the problem that Tesla ran into. They were trying to just use robots for everything, and it didn't work. They had to actually scale back to people, and that was actually where a lot of their setbacks came from. That and their distribution model. But that's also why they switched to a lot of different kinds of in-house solutions and stuff like that, because they had to basically fix a lot of the problems that they had already created at the get-go, because they didn't know. They thought, a lot of people think that Elon Musk thought that if he just turned on a light switch, the whole factory would just run itself. And that's not actually how it works. The larger the operation, the more likely things will go wrong. The more complex any machine is, the more likely it will go wrong. So automation benefits the smaller company, the smaller factory, not the larger one. And that's why every individual, like if AI actually gets implemented, it will benefit the individual, not the large organizations, because it will give you a competitive advantage over them if you can get the data. And data is not the new oil, electricity is, which we can talk about that one if you want. But like, there's a lot of there's a lot of propaganda that's sort of misleading people. And it's causing people to ask the wrong questions and pursue the wrong things. And that's like my biggest, I think that's my biggest concern right now, is that I think people are worried about the wrong things. Google is not necessarily in of itself a problem. It's the way we're thinking about the future. That's the problem, if that makes sense.
I agree. I personally, I don't bash Google or Facebook. I do think they have a lot more power than people realize. And I think, but I personally think they're good for the technology. They allow people to kind of see what really is possible. And I do kind of get what you're saying, that these smaller companies are going to be able to benefit from automating even more so than the big companies. But I wonder if they don't do it fast enough, then they're really just going to rely on these big companies for that. You know, I mean, and generally they will. But I still think that being an independent contractor for those big companies is probably still more rewarding than an employee, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I can, even like Amazon, you know, I had a package shipped today, and it was from an independent contractor who put their sticker on their truck, you know. So I think that maybe there's going to be like the middle ground for bigger business too. Like, you know, there'll probably be a middle ground as well. I was thinking about when I've thought about this a few times actually. So like a lot of the business owners who want to grow right now would find more of a middle ground. Then you would find, I think in the future there's not going to be such a thing as an employee, if that makes sense. Independent contractor, I guess you're still an employee, but not working underneath somebody.
The one way to think about it is if you look at a country, the countries with the highest GDP per capita output are always smaller nations. And so this is the thing about businesses. If they can stay small, they can actually be more productive. Their output will always actually outpace their input. But this is, I guess this is what I'm saying, is that eventually Amazon will not succeed because of its size. As soon as the average worker can produce more than Amazon, can deliver more than Amazon, as soon as these, because they're relying on these contractors, but these contractors will eventually create their own platforms, and they'll distribute for other private businesses. We're already seeing it. They're forming unions right now, and they're basically creating coalitions that are going to be controlling the delivery markets, because there's a huge market right now for remote delivery, just like, you know, couriers and stuff like that. And so, and in turn, because Amazon won't be able to control that, they're not going to be the giant that we think they will be in the future, because they've already lost the thing that they depended upon, and they're already losing it, which is their delivery system.
No, I kind of actually see what you're saying. It's almost like they become the new box store. Well, other places become the new box stores, you know, and they split that with Amazon, you know. Is that what you're kind of saying in a way?
Well, what I'm saying is that the thing that Amazon depends upon to be successful is walking out their door as we speak. So when you thinking about Amazon as being a future giant, I don't think they will be. I think that I think there is actually sort of also a labor revolution that's already happening. And there's some people that are talking about, some economists that are looking at it. If you look at jobs right now, average wages are far higher than they ever were before. Mm-hmm. And you know, and that is partly due to the gig economy, but it's also due to a higher demand for the foundations, because what all these businesses are fighting for is the same thing, which is a foundation. But the foundation is not coming from them. A lot of times they're subcontracting. And yeah, so Tesla did have a good idea with building in-house, but not every company can build in-house. It's very, very expensive. and even the largest companies can't build in-house. And there's also a question of what is in-house. We are always dependent upon other people for something. Tesla is dependent upon South America, I think Bolivia, for lithium. They're calling lithium the new gold or whatever, but it doesn't, we have to think about this differently. And we have to think about, again, our market and our foundation. And we have to realize that we're not the ones actually in control of our foundations. As much as we believe we are, we're not. This is like the idea of being deplatformed, for example. Influencers who use YouTube, if they're deplatformed, that's it, game over, because their foundation was that platform. If we think about our platforms, if we think about the foundations that we're on, then maybe we could look at building, new foundations and stuff like that. But as of right now, we're fighting more for the foundations than we are for the markets. And what I am saying is that the larger businesses, as they grow, there will not be a large enough foundation to support their growth and to support them, and they will collapse. And once that collapse happens, what you're going to see is actual growth in the markets themselves, because there will be new markets that will come up from that.
Oh,
What's that?
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, now I can hear you, but it's this close.
Did it cut me off?
You know why? It's because I think we went no, it didn't cut you off too much, but I think we went close to the threshold and then it reset.
Oh, okay.
It gives you like an hour. I don't know where we're at right now, but
We're like 30 something minutes or 40 minutes, I think.
Okay.
Anyway, is all this making sense like right now?
Oh, dude, this is a good conversation. It's going good.
Yeah, because I don't want to be like a doomsayer, but I'm also kind of like I'm thinking about it in terms of like where did it cut out at? Because like what I was saying.
Honestly, right when you saw me, it was like maybe 3 seconds before I lost my train of thought. We were talking. You were saying about not all businesses can do that. Do what Tesla did. And a little bit farther. That's about where we were at.
Okay. Okay, so what I was going to say is that basically the foundations, a lot of companies are fighting over these foundations, and they're we call it platforms, but that's a little bit vague, because I think about it as like a foundation could be a lot of different things, United States Postal Service, or it could be other things, but they're fighting more for these foundations than they are for the markets, because as you grow, you expand and you actually outpace. If your growth outpaces your foundation, then your company collapses. And so the problem is that a lot of these companies are growing too fast that they're actually going to collapse. You see this in systems where just like anything, if there's too many people that go onto a website at one time, it collapses, because that's too many people piled onto the platform or the foundation. Foundations have limits. And so this is the nature of the game. But the problem is that I think a lot of these larger companies haven't actually created a large enough foundation to support their growth. And so when they collapse, what I think will happen is that you're going to see a lot of new markets come up after these companies collapse, because these companies, these monopolies, prevent new markets from coming up. That's part of their role. So what we should be looking for and essentially waiting for, if you're a small business, you should be waiting and paying attention right now to which businesses are going under, because and also, if you can make yourself a foundation, there's a new market for that. Just being a foundation, a brick and mortar store could be a foundation for something else. Just having actual physical property can be a foundation for something else. We need to change our thinking a little bit, because the foundations themselves are actually more of the product than the markets or than the services. Does that make sense? Like,
I get what you're saying.
I can't hear you.
No, I didn't say anything. I'm actually trying
Okay.
to, I'm thinking about it, because every time when I think about a foundation, like I'm thinking about it, like I said, I use Maslow's hierarchy for business specific, each business owners and things like that. And what I'm kind of seeing is like, in a way, Facebook is like at that peak, and like there's not much more for it, right? For those big companies, they filled that, and now that means that there's a lot more to break apart, like little foundations. They start out, and that's what these. So yeah, Facebook, or listen, Amazon took away from box stores. Box stores went under. Now business owners should be looking how to fill it.
Now what?
I said business owners should be trying to fill those voids now.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, it just like it kept cutting out every time you said that last phrase. But
so basically, what I'm saying is that Amazon created voids because it's from taking away from big box stores, right? Kind of, and now small business owners should be looking at how to fill those, because Amazon can only fill up so much, right? Kind of.
Right. Well, so what they should be doing is either trying to, ideally, if you're a box store or whatever, or a physical store location, you actually have a good opportunity to be a foundation for other businesses. If you look at, like DoorDash and other things like that, the storefronts are now foundations for those platforms. And DoorDash can't exist without restaurants. So that's one example of a sort of a new foundation type of marketing. So the storefronts, they didn't necessarily go away, except they're changing. Their business model is changing in particular, and what they're providing. So they're now more so, they're actually needed more than ever. They're not actually obsolete. That's the other thing. But they're a new foundation for other businesses, and you're going to see this where there's going to be probably a resurgence or a almost like a reworking of the storefront, where it's going to be, they will exist, but they're going to be more of a foundation for other businesses and software and tech companies and stuff like that. I can give you different examples. So let's say you're a pet store and nobody goes into your store anymore because of COVID and lockdowns and everything like that, right? And then I'm a software developer and I want to start a business, right? And so I make pets.com 2.0, right? The first one was a failure. Why? Because they tried to deliver pets to people, and that was a bad idea because they were trying to create their own foundation, which means like keeping pets in like cages in a warehouse or something, and then just like delivering them. It made no sense, and it was an awful idea. But what they can do is you could make a system where you basically have somebody pick up the pet and deliver it, essentially, and they bring the pet to you, essentially. That's like one way. I mean, it sounds very simple, but you could also have them also be like dog walkers and stuff like that. You could also have like a I don't know, like an app system that helps pets make other friends or something. There's really the sky is the limit when it comes to that.
You brought this up because what you just said just brought this to my mind. Is Zillow, right?
Zillow.
Do you know the website Zillow? It's where they
Zillow. Yeah.
So people used to just go on their website and look at houses, basically. Now they sell them. And like, they were just a company that they've been doing it for a long time. They were just there in the background. And now because it's so easy to buy a house online, that's what they are doing. Then even like, Kelly Blue Book now, they'll give you instant cash pricing, right? Or an instant cash price right through the app when you put files in and take a couple pictures. So those are some other examples of what people really be looking at. Is like, but that's getting into a lot of software development, which I know is what you're doing. But like, what's the best way to go about approaching that? How expensive is it
to develop software?
Well, to get a software developed for company, like if somebody thought of a way to do like one of those things, one of the ones that I mentioned, like how much does that cost for them to start?
So again, there's a front end and then there's a back end. So the front end costs $4,000. You can get templates pretty easily if you want to make a Zillow type site or whatever. we built a lot of our stuff in house. But what we made was more back end heavy. What we did is we basically focused less on the we took the front end and we pushed a lot of the stuff towards the back end and made an automation system on the back end. And so that back end factor can run you from $100,000 to $1 million for a sophisticated platform. And that's one of the things that a lot of smaller software developers can't do, because it took us 4 years to make the software system that we made, because I still haven't seen actually anybody make what we made. The problem was the marketing issue and the change factor. We were trying to be a foundation for businesses that were already trying to be a foundation. A lot of the people who are writing out things are already in a position to be a foundation, so they don't want to abandon their storefront because they see themselves as in a position to be a foundation for other companies. So that's but anyways, the biggest thing is that if you're trying to do contract work, you need to break down your work appropriately, and you need to make sure that your customer understands what you're making. And if you're a tech developer of any kind, your customer doesn't understand what you're making, and they don't understand what they want. And so what you want to do is put a lot of investment into the pre-production process. Have prototypes pre-made using Adobe XD or some other kind of prototyping software. Make interactive prototypes, and don't make anything until you are actually getting paid for it. If you're doing contract work, have your designs pre-made, and make sure those are ready to go. And then the other thing is make sure that you get paid. Have a decent payment model. If you can do those things, you can pretty much sell whatever you want. The biggest factor is that I've noticed a lot of people, they want to start a business of some kind, or they want to make a $1 billion startup or something like that. And the most they have are a few pictures of like some products or something like that. They're focused on branding or something like that. You'll see this a lot where your customer has tunnel vision, and they may want your services, but because they have tunnel vision, they don't actually know how to get what they want, because it requires other things. And so you're running into a very big problem off the bat. And so you have to be careful about time investment with that as well, where the job is actually far bigger than the customer says it is. Because they have tunnel vision, they don't realize that it's far bigger. So pricing yourself out correctly, pricing out your work, breaking it down to smaller chunks, making sure the prototypes are correct. And sometimes people just want an idea. Honestly, you could probably sell the interactive Adobe XD prototypes if that's what people wanted. It's, you have to kind of, in a way, think smaller about your work instead of thinking bigger. It's tempting when you can do a lot of things to try to do everything. It's tempting to over-engineer a product or over-engineer a solution. What I'm saying is don't over-engineer it. You can overthink it, that's fine. I never have an issue with overthinking, but over-engineering is where you try to fix the problems of the business by adding more features to the product. And that could be your business or somebody else's. And people tend to do that. They panic, and they'll think, it's not attractive enough, it doesn't look cool enough, or maybe it's just not different enough. And they try to add too many features. That's a big problem, because it will destroy your ability to explain the product. And go ahead.
Yeah, what you just said actually just got me. Like, that's pretty much my philosophy. Is like, if I'm going to add something new to my life or my businesses, I kind of try to optimize everything that's basically, you can stay at it dead still until you get optimized what you have. It's going to make moving forward.
It's kind of like it's basically like this. The best movies are movies that you can explain in one sentence. The best products are products you can explain in one sentence. And the more explainable it is, the easier it is to market, because you have to explain your product to other people, even if you're just doing it on a contract. They ask because they don't translate what you've made to what they either imagined or what they thought it would be, unless you're just doing a clone of somebody else's, which is also fine, because then you don't have to explain it. But if you're making something and like a new kind of product, a new kind of design, it needs to be explainable in one sentence. And so once you go past that one sentence, you need to stop. Like, you need to and you might want to go back because people don't have an attention span longer than 30 seconds in a pitch meeting or in a networking group or in a conversation. If they're not in that field in particular, they don't have patience to hear longer than one sentence. Does that make sense? So,
Oh, no,
so you use the one sentence rule for any product that you're developing to make sure that you don't exceed it. You don't have to go into the nitty gritty of it has to have this many features. It's just the question of, can you say what it is in one sentence and what it does, all in one sentence, what it is and what it does, and ideally the why should be in there, but you don't always have to have the why. But if the customer can understand why based on what you said, that's really important. The more they can grasp from that one sentence, if they can grasp a lot from that one sentence, then you've got a really good product. It's explainability. We could go into that also, because that's another problem that I see happening, is that as things are becoming more complicated, our ability to explain things is actually being lost. And so we're running into this problem where you could make a new product or design or something amazing, and we wouldn't be able to recognize it because you can't explain it. And if you look at the products that caught on, or just anything that catches on, it's when it's explainable. It's the person who explains it that wins. There were many prototypes for like the Apple, touchscreen and stuff like that, but they weren't explainable. Steve Jobs literally, he took three things and he just said a phone, a computer, and an iPod. And then he said it again: a phone, a computer, an iPod. And he said this into this. All these three things into this. And so he explained it one sentence: three things into one. Very simple, very easy to grasp, right? But if he started with just showing the Apple iPhone and saying it does this, it does that, and going down the features list, that would have confused people because that's not in one sentence. So there's also an art to explaining things.
They would have had to follow along. I see that. That's actually
right.
That's a good point.
Right. And the other thing is that if you're a product designer or developer or whatever, you also have to be able to explain what the product is to the people that you're working with. And that's another problem in companies, is that it's like the telephone game, how information gets lost. This is why bandwidth is so important, is because information gets lost the longer it has to travel, the more hands it goes through. This is why automation is also more efficient, is because it creates more consistency, because it decreases the bandwidth of information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, I think you clarified a lot of the points. Just
last
few sentences. It was actually
yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So, yeah, but are there any other questions that you want to know? Because did you want to know about Brain Buddies or anything else like that?
Yeah, actually,
I
was actually gonna just bring that up. Actually, through our conversation, I kind of get where Brain Buddies might be going. But
yeah.
If you want to tell people about it, yeah, I definitely would appreciate that. And like I said, most of the people that watch my channel are they can definitely benefit from it.
Yeah. So I guess I wanted to explain the goal of Brain Buddies. So in the landing page, if you look at it, there's a line and there's two hemispheres or whatever. The way I think about it with people is that we don't necessarily have an opposite, but oftentimes there are other people that can complement ourselves, and a lot of times those people actually are very similar to us. For example, somebody with a similar personality can actually have a different skill set, and you want to have that commonality of communication. And so the goal of Brain Buddies is very simple. It was to basically match people that could basically fill that part that is kind of missing, but also where they understand each other, if that makes sense. Create partnerships essentially between people and just friendships overall. No,
it definitely does. Actually, reason that I met you on Quora was because you had posted something about this, and I said that I had actually met like-minded people through an app, because I like to do some programming and stuff. It's not easy to find people that even have any interest in even these types of conversations. Maybe this website must have worked out well, because we connected, we started to do this episode, you know what I mean? And that's what it is. It's putting things out, and I think that people do get drawn. I do personally. I'm not gonna lie. A lot of people do,
Yeah. But the other thing I was going to say is that there's a lot more to come with that in particular. And like, so this is sort of like just the early implementation, but I don't want to go like too into detail of like as far as like what is being made, but right now, yeah, we're going to make something I think that will be really cool with it. And like, I would encourage people to kind of continue to engage in it because in the next few months, there's going to be a lot of things that are happening with it. An entire kind of like, we want to overhaul a lot of things, and especially in the personality testing and matching fields. So that's kind of like, it's a little bit like vague right now, but I'm excited about it because I think that it'll actually solve quite a few problems that people are having.
Yeah, I agree. There's a reason I like personality typing and being in business. It really helps you, like you said, even people with different personality types, you can understand their strengths too, where they can help you. That's huge. And I think that like that's even one of the progressions that business. I mean, we hear like people like Simons and they talk about giving people purpose. A lot of that has to be understanding what they really need, what is going to satisfy them, to allow them to happily job. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I guess like that I find interesting is that there's all these platforms and services that are about either knowledge sharing or building relationships, but there's actually nothing out there for people to make friendships. I find that kind of strange. It's like because when you think about it, friendships are actually almost more important than all these other things because we learn from our friends. They mentor us in certain degrees, and we mentor them. And we often, like, our earliest customers, if we're starting a business, will be our friends, and our spouses often may start as friends. You know, you don't want to be friend zoned, but ideally, a good relationship has a foundation of friendship behind it. You know, and but I noticed that it's strange that we don't really think about it. We don't really and if I asked you what friendship is, or how, like, what is the process for making friends, in general, there's no real process to it. It's very difficult to define. I've seen a lot of people define friendship as a utility perspective. There's somebody that you want to borrow something from, but that's not what a friend is. That's far from what a friend is. But that is how a lot of psychologists define friendship, is by utilitarian principles. And what I realize is that at the core of it, and this is one of the biggest problems in our society, is that we've collectively stopped believing in free will. And so when people lose their agency, there's no longer any point in engaging with them as a friend. They become a product or a service or a utility or a network or this or that. And so this goes back to what we're talking about as far as like where things are going. And so one of the like my own like personal mission is to convince people that free will exists, and to build platforms that support that, because a lot of the people who have built all these structures and infrastructure, the industrialists, they spent 100 years trying to eliminate people's belief in free will. They tried to mechanize each person and turn them into a machine. And so what I really, really want to see happen is for people to actually recognize their own free will, and to start making choices, and to start developing friendships based on that, to choose their friends and not to have their friends chosen for them all the time, to choose the things that they consume or watch or do. And I think until we kind of do that, it doesn't matter what we make, because it won't be made by us. If you give up your free will, it wasn't made by you. It was made by your hands,
So I have this. This is my take on free will. I think we have like a free will. I don't think it's so much in the moment. I think it's what I did yesterday highly affects what happens today. But I had the will to do that yesterday. I mean, I have the ability. I can plan to say, I've been in health, and I can make those go to bed early. And that's the way free will works. Making the right decision early on, and that's how I like to explain it. It's like you have the ability to work out. You know what I mean? And you have the ability to eat right before you get alcohol. And that's where the rule. And even the people you hang out with, you have the ability to not hang out with those people to create a better life. You know, I just listened to a podcast this morning where they said, say your best friend or somebody in your friend group is overweight. That means that you have, I think it's like a 50% chance of being overweight. The people in another friend group that doesn't know your first friend have a 25%, and then even 3 degrees away, it would be up to 5. That they have the chance, possibility of being overweight or more of. And that's why I see free will, is setting yourself up so that, because I really don't think in a moment you have free will. I think you do have that instincts in a way, but those instincts can be tricked. They're not, I guess it's not instincts. It's reactions that can be tricked, and you know that. That's how I see it. I would love to hear.
So the way I see it is that first of all, if we can't measure it, then I mean, going back to first principles as you were mentioning, a first principle is the ability to measure something. If you can't measure it, it can't be proven to exist, and it's likely to quantify it, or it's unlikely you'll be able to quantify it if you can't measure it, basically. And but I've thought about how you measure free will, and we actually do it with animals all the time. They've done many studies where they'll put a mirror in front of an elephant, and they'll see if it can recognize its own reflection. And so we measure consciousness, and because I think free will is connected to consciousness, we measure consciousness by an animal's ability to recognize themselves and to recognize who they are and to see their reflection and then to know that that is them. And so in that, I believe that free will is actually goes further into that it is about reflection. And so, yeah, you could talk about your habits, but let's say that one day happens and you think about it and you think, why am I doing this? You know, what is this? Like, who am I? Like what is the point of this? Or you hang out with a bunch of people you don't like every day, and you do that because you think that that's what you have to do. But then one day you reflect and you think about who you are, and you think that this isn't who I am. I'm because
that's the moment of free will. What you're talking about, that like when you decide, hey, I'm not going to do this, and
right.
you won't see anything that would say you had free will to change your life right then and there. You will see it later on. You will see the results of it later on. There's nothing you can do in a moment to change any of your circumstances. You have the free will to like you said, reflect, and then some people reflect and don't make those changes. That's kind of, but that's a choice. That is free will. But I can.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the other thing, is that sometimes we assume that free will means that you'll always make the right choices, and that's not true either. You could reflect, like what you're saying, and make the wrong choice. That's part of why it is free will, is because you very much have the choice to be yourself. But within that, there's something else there that holds people back. And a lot of times what I think it is that ultimately they believe they don't have the choice. They think, well, my father, you know, he drank a lot and I'll drink a lot. And my friends, they eat a lot and I'll eat a lot, you know, or these types of things. We think we don't have a choice. And a lot of times we're bought into this aspect, and there is a choice. And if you ignore that choice, if you pretend like you don't have a choice, if you don't believe in the choices you actually have, if you don't believe in who you are, then what will happen is that you'll give in and you'll let other people define who you are. You'll let other people say, oh, you know, you seem like a really smart person. I mean, for me, like, I've been called dumb, I've been called smart, I've been called retarded, I've been called intelligent or crazy. I've heard every list, every, you know, insult you could imagine, and every compliment. But does that actually define any, like, who I am? It doesn't. You know, and who decides who I am? You know, those types of things. But in the long run, I don't think it's our choices that define us. It's that reflection. It's that moment of reflection where you think about, who am I, and do these choices line up to it? And then you make the choices. And yes, that does reinforce it. But even still, even if you lie to yourself and continue to lie to yourself and make the wrong choices, it doesn't mean that actually, you know, that you've changed. You're still denying your own free will. Does that make sense? You're still denying who you are. And so at the heart of it, I think sometimes what people miss is that we can't change who we are. but we can make choices that bring us closer to our true selves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's the journey. That's really what it is. It's like, that's what free will is. It's the ability to find it. I mean, I always think about like old people. You know what I mean? And like when you see like an old person really happy, nothing can upset them. Like you know that they've experienced the things that can get them, and they've done those reflections, and they know. I think a lot of it comes down to like, we don't think we have free will until we realize our own understanding of it. Then like in that we've experienced to create that understanding where we realize the things that we like that showed up. Like you said, it's not really something that can be. I don't think you said consciousness, that awareness can be measured, but not necessarily free will, but like inside of something that, like
What was that last part?
You see it.
Sorry, what was that last part? It cut out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we're.
I think that you wouldn't. I think there's a state. Like how I see it is like there's times when there's almost like I'm kind of not what I said, but there's like stages to like understanding your own free will. As you get older, like I think of it a lot differently now than I would have through my teen years. And I think even through my 20s, like 29 now, and I think there's like a transition going towards where I see what free will is. Where I think when I was younger, it was almost like it was based on instinct in a way. Like I did feel like when you're young, I mean, kind of that you don't have so much free will, you don't understand what decisions there are to make. So is free will something that you understanding?
Yeah. And so the other thing I think about is that free will also requires that there's an objective of some kind, and this is where meaning is so important. You know, like Viktor Frankl and Nietzsche, depending on who you ask or whatever, said that, you know, a man who has his why can endure anyhow, right? But what they don't say is, again, why is that the case? And I think it's because we have to have an objective, something to strive for, and that objective has to be within ourselves. And the thing is that when you're a child, you don't have that objective, you don't have that that idea, you know, that idealized either version of, it could be yourself or it could be some kind of goal or something that you want. But without that core vision of something, it's very difficult to make a choice, because it's difficult to make any kind of choice if you don't know where you're going. You see, like because a choice is not a blind choice. It shouldn't be, you know, here are 3 doors, you have no idea what's behind them, they all look equal. That's not a choice. You know, you could choose 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, but that's not actually a choice, because you have no idea what you're looking for, and you have no idea what is behind any of those doors. So, but the minute that we say, okay, behind one of these doors is $1 million, and behind the other door are a bunch of snakes or whatever, right? Then there is still some choice now, because now there's a goal behind it and there's some kind of objective. And I think that also gets lost on people, is that part of free will is actually setting goals. And but at the deeper elements of a person is that there's a singular greater goal behind everything that we do, and that is to define and to figure out and to become closer to who we actually are. And that core element of ourselves doesn't change. I don't know, but
The only thing I would add on top of that is the fact that maybe the free will is the freeness, the ability to feel free and be yourself. You know, like I'm feeling that. I think that's what people answer is like that ability to be free.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
Yeah. So I mean, the question, I mean, like the ability is definitely important. The question is how does that ability to be free come? I mean, where does it come from? You know, if it comes externally, if you never feel comfortable within your own skin and you feel like an imposter or whatever, it's likely because you're not actually engaging within yourself. Essentially, it's not coming from you internally. It's coming from people outside of you, and that's not actually being comfortable. So when we think about being comfortable with who you are, that really does require self-knowledge. I mean, over and over again, I see it, and even you know, the Oracle of Delphi, it's written above the temple. It says, "Know thyself," and it's the highest value, and I think it's one of the greatest goods. Even if you're an awful person, just knowing that you're an awful person can actually make you a better person in some ways. And so this is the other thing that I've seen, is that some people know that they're not being themselves, but they believe that who they truly are is not good enough or an awful person. And that's not really the case either. That's the other thing that I've seen is the opposite, is that there are some people that believe in free will, but they believe that all they have are bad choices, or that the only and kids often, like a child will often actually believe in free will, but they often believe that most of the options are bad. Basically, I've seen this with kids that, you know, in their teens and stuff like that, where they see it as every option sucks and there's no way out of it, and so I'm just going to do whatever I can to survive. Essentially, you go into a survival mode sometimes because it's hard to see far out as far as like what to value and what you care about. And one thing, going back to the very beginning, as far as like you asked about my grandfather and like what he taught me, and one of the things that he taught me was what to value. And what he said was that the highest value that you have to always keep in mind is the truth. But the truth is actually distributed across everyone, and so within each person is a part of the truth. And so you have to listen to people and you have to talk to people to find it out. But at the same time, it can only come from you. You can't give them the truth that you have within you, no matter how much you may want to. And so he taught me that the truth is like what you were saying, is it's a journey. But when I think more and more about the truth, I think that the truth and self-knowledge are very much related, and that the truth and consciousness are very much related, that we need the truth in order to be actually conscious. Because I've seen it with a lot of people, and a lot of people are losing their ability to reflect, and they're making decisions almost like zombies. The toilet paper scenario, for example, why did people buy toilet? They were just making decisions without even thinking about it. And that scares me, because if people are not making choices, then nothing we do to try to change anything will matter at that point. If people are just sheep and they can't change, you know. And I think there are some people that have lost their ability to change, and that to basically develop their own consciousness. But I'm not trying to go into a superiority argument. I'm just saying that there are levels to it. I think levels to free will, levels to identity, levels to self-reflection, and most people, I think, kind of operate at a lot of the lowest levels, and so we assume that those people don't have free will, or we assume free will doesn't exist because we're sampling the wrong people. Does that make sense?
Yep. It's kind of why I do this channel. I noticed those things, and I think that, you know, I know what you're saying. We can't force it upon people. You can't make people think or recognize these things. But I feel like having the knowledge out there for kind of my goal is to let them, you know, there is other ways to think, and if you want the information there. And honestly, to be honest, I would say that this is probably a pretty good spot to end it. I think that what you brought up, I mean, it clarified. I think business owners have a lot of information they're going to get from this video. And if there's anything you want to let viewers know before we go, let you take the mic. If not, then I'm really glad that we talked.
Yeah. The only last thing I'll say is don't be too busy, I guess. Like, no solution requires that you essentially give up your entire life to it. Just always make time for yourself, no matter what people tell you or whatever. Take time off, take time to yourself. A lot of times I've seen it with business owners, they try to make themselves so busy that they don't have time to think. And always make sure that you have time to think, and always make sure you have time to reflect. If you can do that, I think that you can succeed, because then you can change. So that's the last thing I'll say.
No, that's awesome advice, Jeff. And I really thanks a lot for coming on. And I hope we do this again.
Yeah, thank you.
Good.